Yeah, I mean, these are the most egregious cases. I mean, in my career, these are some of the worst cases that I've seen. This is producing child pornography. This is trafficking in fentanyl. I mean, bringing poison into our communities. This is a person neglecting children. These are egregious cases. They're cases that local law enforcement did a phenomenal job investigating, and now we're hearing from DOJ they're trying to push local law enforcement out of that.
That was Rogers County District Attorney Matt Ballard late last year when the Biden administration's Justice Department sued him, saying he was not allowed to prosecute tribal citizens on tribal land. The Trump administration has decided to keep that lawsuit going. This is likely going to be the next major U.S. Supreme Court case involving Oklahoma and its tribes. And that's what we're going in depth on tonight. Today, Ballard went to the state capitol and told lawmakers there the cost of such a case could bankrupt his office, but the feds are not backing down. Rogers County District Attorney Matt Ballard pleaded with state lawmakers for more funding on a case that's more than likely to bring Oklahoma and its tribal nations back to the U.S. Supreme Court.
This wasn't a fight that we went looking for. This was a fight that was brought to us, but it's one that we believe in. It's one that we believe is important, and it's one that we know is not going away quickly.
Ballard says talks with the Trump administration to drop a legal challenge from the Biden administration last Christmas were not successful, and the case is now putting a financial strain on his agency. But because the Justice Department insists they are right no matter who is president, Ballard and other Green Country District attorneys are worried a prolonged and expensive legal battle is likely.
I would have to have significant reductions in staff. I would involve layoffs. I would not be able to prosecute cases. It would be a burden that my office just simply couldn't take.
The DOJ's complaint lays out the history of tribal jurisdiction over tribal citizens who commit crimes in what is known as Indian country, which they say was reinforced by the U.S. Supreme Court's 2020 McGirt decision and again by the 2022 Castro Huerta ruling. The DOJ says Ballard filed state charges in at least 3 cases involving Native American defendants. In all 3 of those cases, the defendant is also charged in federal or tribal court, with 2 of them already being sentenced for their crimes and the 3rd scheduled to go to trial this year. The DOJ believes Ballard is interpreting the law too broadly by charging Native Americans on Indian land.
I mean, what you have here truly is the tribes and the federal government are trying to get a federal district judge to determine that we don't have jurisdiction to prosecute cases that are investigated by our local sheriff's offices, that are investigated by our state narcotics bureaus.
A joint House and Senate committee voted to grant Ballard's request for $100,000 in additional funding so his office won't have to cut people or services while the case proceeds. It will also likely be used to hire outside counsel to represent his office and Okmulgee County DA Carol Iskey.
I think it's just as essential to Oklahoma's well-being to not only prosecute crimes and to be good at that, but to do it in a way that's consistent with tribal sovereignty.
Norman Democratic Senator Mary Boren was one of 2 who voted no for the funding, saying she hadn't studied the particular cases, but she was concerned the state was funding a fight that would weaken the tribe's ability to govern over their land.
If we're operating on the presumption that we're unsafe, that we're less safe, that our children are less safe, that our communities, our state is less safe every time we honor tribal sovereignty, then our state can't, that's not a sustainable assumption.
So you're probably wondering, the big question here the state lawmakers voting on the funding increase had themselves is, where is the Attorney General's office? The AG's office actually told them it has a conflict of interest and cannot represent Rogers County and their DA's office at this time because of previous comments they've made about tribal sovereignty in this instance. So let's take a look at the 3 cases that Ballard says he has to prosecute because these crimes were so egregious. He said some of the worst he's seen in his time leading the Rogers County DA's office. The first is this man, Braden Bull. Bull admitted filming himself sexually abusing a toddler he was babysitting, and then Bull shared that video on social media. So not only do you have child rape, but also child pornography charges as well. Bull is Navajo, and the crime took place on Cherokee land. The feds prosecuted him, and he was sentenced to 50 years in prison, plus once he is released, lifetime supervision. Ballard says he can prosecute Bull because he is not a tribal citizen of any Oklahoma tribes, especially on Cherokee land where the crime was committed. The second case caught up in this lawsuit is Tony Williams. Williams was busted by the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics, their agents, for selling oxycodone pills laced with fentanyl. He has been caught selling fentanyl before as well. 2 other non-tribal citizens were charged and faced heavier punishment. Williams was not charged in Rogers County Court. Williams was charged in Cherokee Nation Tribal Court, but Ballard says the punishment was too soft and the drugs he was selling are too dangerous. And the third case at issue is this man, Eric Ashley. Ashley is charged with child neglect for having several children in his house, where investigators found fentanyl, meth, cocaine, and drug paraphernalia. While being interviewed by law enforcement, reports show Ashley admitted to nearly daily fentanyl use himself inside the home with the children present. His case is still in progress. Just in the last 5 years, there has been a lot of action both in state and federal courts involving tribal citizens and what the state of Oklahoma can and cannot do with them. This all started in 2020 with the McGirt ruling that said Congress did not disestablish Oklahoma's Indian reservations when it became a state. That means tribes and feds only have jurisdiction on crimes committed on tribal land by tribal citizens. In 2022, there was a modification to McGirt known as Castro Huerta. Federal and state governments have concurrent jurisdiction to prosecute crimes committed by non-Native Americans against natives on tribal land. In 2022, the Supreme Court also ruled that McGirt was not retroactive, so it wasn't a get-out-of-jail-free card for all tribal offenders. And in 2023, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled the city of Tulsa and Tulsa police could not enforce traffic laws broken by tribal citizens on tribal land. But in that ruling, Justices Kavanaugh and Alito said McGirt and municipal laws will still need further review. Now, in addition to all of that we just told you about, this case is brewing in Rogers and Okmulgee counties. The U.S. Supreme Court has seen a lot of Oklahoma cases lately, and it's not just tribal issues. In addition to all of those tribal sovereignty cases we told you about, they just heard the case of St. Isidore of Seville Online Catholic Charter School, and if it is a violation of separation of church and state. And the court also heard the case of now former death row inmate Richard Glossop. They threw out his previous 2 convictions, saying he didn't get a fair trial and critical evidence was withheld from his attorneys. His new trial is pending in Oklahoma County, and he has been moved off of death row.